Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope everyone is well, in the best of spirits, in the best of health, as I welcome you to episode 4 of the Pursuit for Meaning. In the last episode, we discussed about the importance of the ultimate questions for practical life. And this next segment, what we're gonna do is we'll be discussing an important question. Is that if you say there is an ultimate question of life, or a person should answer this ultimate question of life, which is what am I, where am I going, why do I exist, and all the kind of things, and what are the sources of how we can gain understanding in to answer these very important questions of our life. And it's very important for us to take note that such questions cannot be taken lightly, because how you answer them, why you answer them, and what influences you to answer them must be really, really taken into consideration. A person came to one of the great companions of the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidina Ali, Karimallah Wajha, and asked him about his belief in the afterlife. I'm paraphrasing, I cannot remember exactly how it goes, but it was something like this. The person said, what evidence and what is the benefit of you living your life living there as though there's an afterlife? And he said that if I lived my life knowing that there is an afterlife, and if I live my life knowing there is no afterlife, and I wake up one day after I die realizing that there is an afterlife, what will I do? So I rather not take the chance. This is something very amazing, because the doubters will always doubt. But when you reflect on it carefully and honestly, and to break away from societal imprints on you, and to break away from even racial imprints on you, people are in religious factions, religious groups, sometimes today because of inheritance. They inherited from their parents, inherited from their whatever they are, the religions that they inherited, and they never think beyond the boxes. And in the Islamic perspective, those people who inherited religion are not inherited Muslims are not that great. They're called nominal Muslims. Like, you inherited the religion, and they have not discovered the deen. And what led them to not discover it sometimes is just because of taking for granted, and so on and so forth. But when you really challenge yourself and look out in the world and ask yourself these questions: why am I here, what am I doing here, what am I, and so on and so forth, we need to break away from all of this inherited preconceived notions that we have inherited through our birth. And it may be our race, might be our religion, might be our socio-economic background, and all of these kind of things. All of these affect why and what we are. And when a person has the courage to break free from all of this and to look at things for what it is, that's where real knowledge can come. And usually this kind of situation comes through intense desperation, where they sit down and they are in utter need. There's a very interesting story where a person was asked, do you believe in God? No. Okay. If I were to cast you into the sea, dead into the sea, and there is no way of you getting back to land, will you continue swimming? He said yes. He said, why? In hope that I might be safe. Hope. Think about it. What's hope? Anyway, to continue our next segment today, as I mentioned earlier, like how do we come to this? How does one attain or answer these ultimate questions of life? What are the sources that we can go to answer these questions? Maulana Farooq Mansari, in his book, The Muslim Foundation of Muslim Society, says there's three. He calls it number one, science, number two, philosophy, and number three, religion. And this segment, for science, he first discusses about the history of science, we say, with the human existence today, where he tells us and explains to us the why science has looked at religion as backwards or stupid, or and why Europe in general, after the 18th century, has had a negative reaction towards religion or anti-religion. And he says it was because, and of course we know why, it's because in those times the Christians used to burn the scientists, and call them witches, and call them heresy, because and charge them with heresy and all that kind of stuff. And how like Galileo, Copernicus, all of them were killed because of the church's injunctions. And so I wanna, if you can see, he discusses that all of this year, but I wanna skip over all of this and to just go to a part which I wanna highlight on. And if you want to read this, you can read it. I'll send you guys a link. I'll put the link into the description for you guys to have. But what I want to really look at is this part here. Here. But the question remains: is science really capable of answering the ultimate questions on the basis of sure knowledge? As what I was mentioning earlier, sure knowledge is basically without doubt. Can science attempt to answer, give you the answers of the ultimate question without doubt? And so Maulana then will explain to us some things. Let's go. The answer to this question lies in the analysis of the scientific method. The scientific method of obtaining knowledge consists in observation and experiment. We shall have to examine the validity of the observation in order to find out as to how far it can help us in solving with any certainty the ultimate problems. Scientifically viewed, every observation is made out of three factors, namely, number one, the observer; number two, the object which is observed; number three, conditions under which the observation is made. Let us examine these factors and find out whether they are variable or stable in order to understand if we can arrive at sure knowledge of ultimate things on the basis of observation. The first factor is the observer. Now, observation is bound to vary from observer to observer, because different human beings do not have similarly sharp and accurate powers of observation, either as regards their physical senses of sight, smelling, hearing, taste, and touch, or as regards to the intellect, which coordinates the reports that the brain gets through the physical senses. For instance, a person may be colorblind or myopic, and as such his observation will always differ from the observation of those who have what is called normal eyesight. Similarly, a person may be hard of hearing, or may have lost the smelling sense, or the discrimination of taste, or the sense of touch, or he may be an idiot or a lunatic. It is thus a well-established fact that the first factor in observation is a variable factor, which means that the different observations can vary on the basis of this factor. So I hope you know what that means. It means that the first factor in the scientific method, which is the observer, and the observer, as what Maulana proves without doubt, that the observer is a variable factor. And why is variable important? He will explain not further later on. The second factor is the object which is observed. It does not require much deep thought to realize that the more immediate, the more concrete, and more comprehensible an object is, the more it is possible of the observation being correct. And the more remote, the more subtle, and the more ungraspable an object is, the less possibility is there for anything like correct observation. Nay, even for observation itself. For instance, if we have to find out the chemical properties of sodium chloride or of calcium carbonate, it is something easily available in its standard form. Also, it is something which is concrete, and it is something which can be examined in a test tube. But even in immediate objects, if we turn to atomic physics and try to observe the behavior of the atoms, it is bound to be a most difficult task. Although the atom concerned may be of sodium, or of calcium, or of carbon, going to remote objects and trying to observe them is a different matter altogether. For instance, if we try to observe the interplanetary strata, there are bound to be different opinions, even as they are there already. As a matter of fact, even in the case of an object like the moon, which is observed and enjoyed even by the child, scientific observation begs for accuracy. For instance, till some time back, scientists had agreed on a certain calculation of the different distance between the Earth and the moon. But now they say it was a miscalculation and that the real distance is more than what they have believed in. This is something we experience all the time actually. We see like scientists discover new discoveries, and how they make it such a amazing feat. But they were discussing it before as matter of fact. And the people believe it as a matter of fact, and they never reflect on, you mean we were basing our entire science on false assumption? We carry on. Coming now to the third factor, namely the conditions under which an observation is made, we find that it is also a variable factor. For instance, if we take a straight rod and dip a portion of it in water, thereby placing one part of it in the medium of water and keeping the other part in the medium of air, we observe that the straight rod appears tilted at the point where the air and water meet. Although, when we view it in one medium, which may be air or water, it always appears straight. This normal change in appearance of the shape of the rod is due only to the change of conditions of the observation, and not due to any change in the structure of the rod. Another common instance is that where the distance of an object varies. For instance, when we view a sandy waste in the sultry heat of the sun from a distance, it appears to us as if it's a huge expanse of water, the common phenomenon in the desert known as a mirage. The false nature of this observation becomes known to us only when you approach the supposed lake of water. This means that if we have become contented with the first observation, we always remain in misunderstanding about the supposed lake of water. We have seen in the foregoing that all the three factors which constitutes a scientific observation are variable. In other words, any and every scientific observation liable to vary in its accuracy according to any one or two of these factors. The margin of this possibility of error in scientific observation becomes wider and wider as the objects observed become more subtle and more distant. This means that physical science can be a good guide and source of knowledge only on our immediate and most physical problems, although even there it is not immune from error. Indeed, it has been making lots of mistakes, as is well known to every student of history of science. As regards to the ultimate problems which comprehends within themselves the entire universe and all aspects of existence, it should be very plain, even to a person of ordinary intelligence, that it would be extremely unscientific and even foolish to expect sure and accurate solutions from physical science. We have said that in the foregoing that physical science cannot give us sure knowledge in all cases, even in regard to the immediate physical objects. We might illustrate this fact by instances. The human body is the most immediate physical object of observation for a scientific observer. But in spite of the fact that physical science is carrying man to the moon, it has not succeeded so far in mastering thoroughly the mysteries of the human body. After this, Maulana continued to discuss the different examples which science have actually assumed to be true and how it has made mistakes along the way. But I want to bring us to one example which I find is very important for us to highlight, which he discusses in the book. And here it is. We may also give an instance considering the ever-changing characteristics of scientific conclusions as regards to the ultimate problems. We might leave out here the pre-Newtonian scientific thought in order to be more charitable and consider only the era starting with Newtonian physics, which is considered to be an era of maturity of science. But what situation we find here too? Sir Isaac Newton affirmed and proclaimed to the world that the universe was three-dimensional and that space and time were two different and independent entities. The scientific progress after him proceeded on this assumption. It was held by scientists to be an infallible truth, which they defended and by which they swore day in, day out. But then came Einstein, who proved, again scientifically, that Newtonian physics was all wrong in its foundations, that the universe was not three-dimensional but four-dimensional, that time was the fourth dimension of space and not an independent entity, that instead of immutability on which materialism had thrived, there was interdeterminacy in the universe, which renders the scientific affirmation of the existence of God possible. And science had proceeded since then to show that matter itself is unreal. Who knows that tomorrow another great scientist may come and explode the physics of Einstein also. So I guess I think that would be good enough for us to discuss. I think the key takeaways of whatever we discussed, what Maulana was trying to show in this segment of science, was to show that science, even though today has somewhat claimed somewhat of a priesthood or infallibility of truth, we see through the scientific method of the observer, the observed, and the object which you observe, and the conditions which you observe. And if there's three factors are variables, cannot be kept constant, then how would you assure yourself that you can come to ultimate truth? And then also he discussed and showed us how science has changed many of its perspectives, many of its understandings. Most notably will be in the field of physics, where there was a time where the idea of the apple falling on the floor, and said that force or gravity was a pulling force, and how Einstein debunked that. And from then on, science took on a whole different trajectory. And how is it impossible for us to consider that one day there will be another so-called Einstein who will then disregard Einstein's theory of relativity? So I think it's good that we stop here. It's been a bit of a long one, this one. And the next segment we'll discuss philosophy and its attempt to answer the question of the ultimate life. Till next one. Ciao. Thank you everybody for watching The Pursuit for Meaning. And if you enjoyed and appreciated what we have put out here, it will help us a lot for you guys to like, share, and subscribe. And also, if you want to join our little community we are building, the links to the Discord is in the description below. Thank you. Bye.